All right, everybody, grab a seat. It is time for episode number 6 of the And1 Analytics podcast. I'm your host, Alex West, and today I'm joined by special guest Emily Tellman, Spurs superfan. She's going to walk us through the Spurs season. We're going to talk about the disappointing Western Conference Finals, and Emily's going to tell us about a bus full of NBA players that she does not like, as well as talk about Spurs assistant Becky Hammon and her role as a woman in professional basketball. So sit back and enjoy the podcast. So we tried out something new on the podcast today. We were going to try to have a guest in studio, and that didn't work out. We had some technical difficulties, so we have Emily on the phone. Emily?
Hi, Alex.
Hi, resident Spurs fan, and we're here to talk a little Spurs basketball.
That's right.
So let's start with the obvious, I guess. What is the temperature of Spurs fandom about Zaza Pachulia right now?
Well, I'll put it this way: if I were putting people on a bus to drive off a cliff, Zaza Pachulia would definitely be making the cut.
Now, this is not the first hearing. This is not the first time I've ever heard about the bus. Will you let our listeners know who else is on the bus?
Well, at this juncture, Steven Adams is probably going to be on the bus. I'd say LeBron James also has a ticket.
Okay.
Loath though I am to say it, Nene probably also makes the cut.
Okay. And what is the bus? The bus, how do you define who makes the bus?
Basically people who have wronged the Spurs, or myself, but at this point the Spurs.
Okay. Wait, it's also personal wrongs by NBA players?
Yeah, but we can keep that off the podcast.
Okay. So, why did Nene make it on the bus?
Well, he was giving us problems
During the playoffs. And I remember when you said that he got a seat on the bus. And
yeah, which I didn't, I liked Nene. I wanted to like Nene, but he got himself a spot, I think.
Okay. So, LeBron, Nene, Steven Adams, and now Zaza Pachulia.
Zaza Pachulia is driving the bus.
He's driving the bus. So he's the wrongest of the wrong.
At this moment, yeah.
Okay. So, let's talk about game 1. Let's talk about up 23, Kawhi gets injured. How do you feel at that moment? Right when he's injured, before the run, how do you feel?
I mean, it's heartbreaking. We know that left ankle had been giving him problems, and without Kawhi, the Spurs can't do it. Everyone knew it going in, so it just, I don't know. You're kind of crestfallen. Like, what are you going to do when your best player is probably injured? It's kind of hard to internalize.
And it's a pretty serious. I mean, something he dealt with. Turned his ankle before in Game 4 of the Houston series, and then just sort of gave him problems. He sat out a couple of games, and then just came back in Game 1 with a fire. But it just wasn't quite right after he turned it on David Lee's foot. Is David Lee on the bus for accidentally putting his foot out there for Kawhi to turn it on the first time?
No, I don't think David Lee's on the bus, no.
Okay, so you can't accidentally get on the bus?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
There has to be some malintent.
All right. And so after the big run, you lose Game 1. How do you feel? Do you just think, no, there's no shot at this now?
Well, I thought if any team was just going to kind of be the dark horse and be the ones to compete with the Warriors, the unfriggin' stoppable Warriors, even with a player down, I think it would have been the Spurs, just because Pop is a basketball wizard, but it didn't happen, and it's really sad. I think a lot of people think that we were denied a much more interesting series. And that's tough.
Let's get that. Let me ask the hard question here. Let me ask the hard-hitting question. Do you win that series with Kawhi Leonard?
I want to say yes, but also no.
Okay, but it
No.
goes to 6 or 7.
Yeah. I mean, it's a competitive series with Kawhi. I don't think they win, but it's a competitive series at least.
Yeah.
With Kawhi, we certainly don't get the sweep, by my estimation.
Yeah. Let's take a more broad view of the playoffs. Let's go back to the Houston series. How did you feel in the Houston series? Just sort of a series that a lot of people predicted that you would be the underdogs in. How did you feel going into it, and then how did you feel coming out of it?
Well, the Rockets are definitely they're contenders, but it is the James Harden show. And, when we have a healthy Kawhi and then a solid 4 other guys around him, I don't really think there was a whole lot the Rockets could do. I mean, they've got that star power up front. James Harden is the real deal, obviously. Nobody's denying that. But I don't think the one-man show was going to be enough to beat the Spurs.
You thought that going in? You thought the Spurs were the favorites going in?
I wasn't sure going in. With all the buzz about James Harden. I wasn't sure.
And they were a really good three-point shooting team, and that sort of variance just makes games difficult to predict.
Right.
And then how did you feel in Game 6 when it was just utter Kawhi-less annihilation of Houston?
That's kind of going back to what I was saying earlier. Like, if there's a team that's going to do it, kind of going to sort of defy the odds, it's going to be the Spurs.
And so you think the Game 6 is indicative, or what you thought was going to happen?
I didn't really know what I thought was going to happen. Considering I don't consider myself an expert.
Well, I already said that you were an expert on the show, so
you said that I was a fan, which I'll own.
Oh, okay. I didn't say that. I thought I put you up as an expert when I.
Well, I'm glad you did, and I think that would be a bit of a misnomer.
Okay. And so in going into the off season, a lot of turnover for the Spurs, a lot of potential changes. I think the big one that's sort of on everybody's mind right now is Jonathan Simmons. And I wrote a piece today about how Jonathan Simmons will probably be making $17 million and starting for the Nets next year. Do you see any chance that Simmons comes back?
I don't think so. He's young. He's got a lot of, good years left. And he's got time to chase money right now. He doesn't, the Spurs might be a storied and great franchise to play for, but, he's got time to chase money, so I feel like that's what he's going to do. And if that means going to the Nets, so be it.
And the one thing that the Spurs don't do is overpay role players. There's like a laundry list of guys like Gary Neal, Aaron Baines, Tiago Splitter, George Hill, just dudes that were on deck to get paid, and then the Spurs just didn't pay them, and they ended up going elsewhere with varying degrees of success. I think George Hill overall in Indiana was pretty successful. He had a fantastic year this year in Utah. So he's one of the upsides, but then you got guys like Splitter who left for Atlanta and was just he's maybe played half a game since he left San Antonio, I feel like.
Yeah.
And then the Bobcats paid Gary Neal an exorbitant amount of money to be okay. I feel like, and I'll ask you, what do you feel like Simmons' upside is? Do you think he's a potential all-star, or does he fall just under that level as somebody who's watched him a couple of times this year?
I don't see him being an all-star. Definitely a solid player, fun to watch, pretty explosive. But I don't know that I see that all-star star power in him, at least at this point.
Yeah, he
What about you?
I think he's got a ton of upside. I'm kind of right there with you. Like, there's a lot to love about Jonathan Simmons. He has a high motor, which is you can't teach that. He makes a lot of hustle plays as a result of his high motor. He is good at creating his own shot. He's not so great at creating shots for others, but he's good at getting his own shot. He is a pretty decent spot-up shooter, and so if he fell into the right situation where he could kind of be a zero guard that could create, I think that would be a pretty ideal situation for him. And the reason I said Brooklyn is Brooklyn only has like $63 million committed this year, and so nobody in the top tier, the Blake Griffins, the Gordon Haywards, nobody's meeting with Brooklyn, but they can overpay a lot of mid-level guys, and
definitely.
And that will be the potential for Simmons will probably be high on that list, and the other guy will be my guy Kelly Olynyk, who might be getting overpaid for his one big Game 7 performance.
But what a game it was!
Yeah, what a game it was. So let's roll over and talk about Patty Mills. Patty Mills also a free agent this year, sort of in the same boat. Pop even said he wished people would stop talking about Patty Mills because they'd have to pay him too much. What are your thoughts on Patty as a player for the Spurs, and then probably going forward as a non-Spur?
I like watching Patty play. I think he kind of works in the Spurs machine very well. He's someone that you're, again, probably not really writing home about, but he definitely, I think, is a pretty integral part of the machine. If he leaves, that'll be sort of disappointing to me. Because I think he's a pretty valuable part of the machine, like I said. Yeah,
the thing that bothered me about Patty Mills in the playoffs was his inability to be a slash and kick driver. Like Tony Parker has made such a living on being able to get into the lane and then find open shooters, or also because he's insanely quick and has such a good shot, he can stop on a dime and shoot a jump shot. And that's the thing that disappointed me about Patty when he took over the number one role as the point guard, was just that he didn't really show that kind of slash and kick, penetrator, warp the defense, and then be able to find a shooter potential like Tony Parker did.
Right. He didn't really have the energy, or at least he didn't show that kind of energy.
Yeah. And I think that probably weighs on his mind. I mean, on Pop's mind a little bit more than it would for other people, just noticing the deficiencies that Patty Mills brings. Whereas he's a great three-point shooter off the dribble, he can score, he plays pretty good defense, but he doesn't do the great Spurs machine of creating magnificent ball movement.
Right. Where's the fire?
So who else is a free agent? Parker, I guess, is no Manu. Sorry, not Parker. Manu is a free agent. Is this the end of the road for Manu?
I think so. He, in the quintessential Spurs fashion, I don't think he's going to be one to ask for, a farewell tour. I think maybe he'll just sort of sneak away in the night, like Timmy D did.
You think that is a very Spurs thing to do, just sort of
very
sneak off?
I mean, he's being coy right now. I'll talk about it with my wife. Postseason, whatever. But we can't forget this guy's turning 40. Like, he's had a good career, he's had a good run, but I think it's probably about that time for Manu.
Yeah, he turns 40 in July,
I think.
Yeah. So that's starting to get up there, particularly for a guard. But the thing about Manu, or at least my impression of Manu, has always been like he was the prototype zero guard. When I say zero guard, I mean like a guy who can play point guard, who can handle the ball, who can create plays for other people, but also a guy who can play shooting guard and create shots for himself. And Manu was James Harden before James Harden was James Harden, which is this dude who was just beyond gifted, left-handed, magnificent passer, a totally underrated passer. And I think his legacy is hopefully recognized for what it should be. But sometimes I don't think Manu gets recognized for what he should be as a player. In the like Spurs fans most definitely recognize and appreciate it. But I feel like in the great perspective of the NBA, sometimes Manu's contribution to the game, both as an international player and as a prototypical left-handed super guard, is sort of lost sometimes.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I sort of get the impression that Manu is a player's player.
Oh yeah, he's definitely.
He gets a lot of respect within the NBA circles, I feel like.
Oh, most definitely. That's a very astute observation, I think. I mean, because Manu's like, everybody wants to see Manu and talk to Manu and all that stuff. Maybe it's because of his career's ended, but I think a lot of it has to do with, being a player's player.
And it seems like there's nothing but respect for him.
Yeah. I just feel like sometimes, though, it's just not enough. Like, they legitimately beat, granted not the top of the game USA, but they beat Team USA in the Olympics. And that, there's something to be said for, and
nothing to sneeze at.
That's been 13 years ago now. As the 2004 Olympics, they won gold in Athens. But that was, I think that was kind of a renaissance for basketball too, though. Even though the USA sort of reassumed their dominance, I think that was a renaissance for international basketball, where you see guys, the high level foreign prospects that are coming over, particularly from Europe now. I think that was a moment where basketball sort of got shoved into the forefront because Team USA lost.
Now, you can answer this for me. Was Pop kind of a pioneer for taking on foreign talent?
Oh yeah, Pop is probably the pioneer. I mean, the first guy I remember, Arvydas Sabonis. But then, like, the first big guy in my lifetime that I remember was Tony Kukoc. And Kukoc played for Croatia, Yugoslavia. I don't want to tell you the wrong team, the wrong Balkans country. I want to say it's Croatia. Yeah, it's Croatia. So he played in the 92 Olympics, he played against the Dream Team. And that was... Yeah, so Croatia had just become independent, and they had a basketball team at the 92 Olympics, and they played against the Dream Team, and Kukoc was the big star on that team, and then Pippen and Jordan just kind of like dogged him at the Olympics because Chicago had his rights, and they wanted to see what he was made of, and they kind of dogged him. But I remember when he first came over, he was a very solid contributor. The first year he was in the league, he was, which was the 93-94 season, he was a really quality player, and that's like the first international player that I remember making a buzz, just in terms of the sort of the mystique that European players brought on. But beyond that, like, definitely a lot of most of the guys I remember are Pop guys in some way, or the Gasols. But like Tony Parker being out there, Manu, they just played a brand of basketball that was so familiar to foreign guys. Well, a very ball movement oriented, slash and kick, the kind of ball that has dominated the NBA. The Spurs were playing it 15 years ago, and I think that's what appealed both ways, both international players wanting to come play for the Spurs and the Spurs wanting international players, was just because of the similar style.
Why is it, do you think, that that brand of basketball has been kind of written off as boring from time to time, on the ESPN?
I think that was kind of a backwards narrative that sort of got played up for a while, like particularly in the mid-2000s, because basketball has changed dramatically in about the past, I'd say probably there's like a big cutoff right around like 07, 08, in the changeover from the old ground and pound a lot of low-scoring 70s and 80-point playoff games. And then they switched some of the hand-checking rules, and they got a little more stern on how defenses worked. And then it opened up into more of the slash-and-kick game. But I feel like people were saying that the year that I remember people saying the Spurs were boring the most was the year of the Pistons finals, which would have been 05. 05? Yeah, 05. And that was the year that everybody said they were boring, and then that just kind of stuck. When it wasn't, in fact, true. The Pistons, I think, were a much more boring team because they almost single-handedly brought the NBA to a grinding halt in terms of pace. And then
that can be hard to watch.
It can be hard to watch, like this year with Utah. But I think that was where the Spurs are boring narrative came from, and then it just kind of stuck around. Like, even though we knew it wasn't true, and then the title in 14 was kind of the redemption, where people stopped saying the Spurs were boring.
Because Kawhi is fun to watch.
They all were. That whole team. 14 Spurs was one of the underrated teams, just in terms of player quality. And of course, in the future, they won't be underrated because we'll have the perspective of looking back on Kawhi's career after he goes on to have a statue built beside David Robinson and Tim Duncan and Pop.
Is that what you see happening?
Yeah, they're just going to build one big statue, and it's going to be David Robinson, Manu, Tony, Kawhi, and Pop just standing outside AT&T Center.
So what do you think? I didn't get your take on it. Do you think Manu's done? Do you think Ginobili's out?
Yeah, Manu's done. I mean, he had a couple throwback games. He got that amazing block on Harden. He blocked that game winner on Harden. And after all that, it just seems like you're probably not beating the Warriors in the next couple of years. And that might be the end game. Like, Manu just wants to win another title. And if you felt like it was a little bit closer, maybe. But I don't see it happening.
Because while he might have one more season in him, he certainly doesn't have 5.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Manu's not playing until he's 45.
No.
So let me get to a source of much of your consternation, particularly this postseason. Let's talk about Lamarcus Aldridge.
Must we?
Yeah, we must. How do you feel about Lamarcus Aldridge, year 2 of Lamarcus Aldridge?
Well, it's really frustrating. I think everybody hoped for a lot more out of Lamarcus Aldridge. He was kind of hyped up. You want to have utmost faith in anybody that Pop brings on board, but he's just not really panned out for us thus far, has he? No, he is not.
Do you think... I heard an interesting question the other day, and I'd sort of like to get your perspective from the inside. Do you think it's a cultural... he doesn't fit in sort of a cultural way?
How do you mean? Elaborate.
Just the Spurs culture being what it is, where Pop's kind of the general and everybody's kind of the troops, and it's a very stern environment where at 9:30 we're going to go through stretches, and then at 10 o'clock we're going to do shoot around, and then at 11 we're going to get treatment. And compared to a lot of organizations where it can be a little bit more free-flowing, the Spurs have a very linear existence. Do you think it's maybe a cultural fit mistake for him?
I mean, yeah, that's definitely an interesting point. It is the Spurs, I would imagine, lead a very regimented life, much with Pop at the helm of everything they do, and that very well could be sort of a cultural clash.
Do you see him? Do you see him being a part of the future? Like, I mean, I don't know that they're going to build a statue of him, but you
don't think he's going to get a statue beside the Kawhi statue?
No, I don't think he's going to get. But do you see him being a part of the future of the Spurs going forward, or do you think maybe this is Pop's kind of great failure when it comes to signing free agents?
Boy, I don't know. Well, I would have to see like I have a say in the matter.
Okay.
Like Pop's gonna call me for for my opinion on the matter.
You never
but,
know. You never know where Pop is going to get his opinions from. You could be the next Becky Hammon.
I could be the next Becky Hammon. It's the dream. I would, if this had been sort of a trial period, like a probationary period for Lamarcus Aldridge, I don't see him being a fit, which I think would
You mean like when they first hire you on the job, 90 days to see if you fit in with the team?
Exactly.
And you're thinking Lamarcus is probably not making it past his probationary period?
It's going to be a no for me, dog.
I think that the disappointing thing for me is 2014, 2015 Lamarcus Aldridge, the year that they had, they played so well in Portland. They made a decent little playoff run. They beat Houston that year. No, they didn't. I'm sorry. That was the year before. It was 2013, 2014 when they beat Houston. But there's 2 seasons. The 2 seasons preceding the San Antonio season, he was like a 23-point, 11 rebound guy, and he looked like a legit power forward who could play a small ball center, who would get double figures in rebounds, and then it just kind of fell off in a sort of a disappointing way. Not a huge decline. I mean, the scoring decline you're fine with, but dropping down from 11 rebounds to 7 this year. Do you think it's more indicative of age, or do you think he's a worse player, or do you think it's a scheme thing that his stats are lower?
How old is Lamarcus Aldridge?
He's 31.
Okay, so he's no spring chicken.
He will be 32 in July. I
don't know. You do really raise an interesting point about the culture, one that I hadn't really considered. Maybe that's why he's fallen off.
Yeah, maybe. I just think that there's a lot of things that you have to consider. It's like maybe he's a cultural misfit, maybe he's aging. There's just a lot of things, but certainly the outstanding point in all that is that Lamarcus Aldridge has not been the player that you wanted him to be.
No, most certainly not.
So I think I just have probably one more. Well, no, I got a couple more questions for you. We'll just go through them quickly. But one thing that I really wanted to get to, my quicker questions are: do you feel competitive with the current roster or some iteration of the current roster going forward against the Warriors?
Well, I think I speak for a lot of Spurs fans when I say I would really be interested to see these Chris Paul murmurs pan out.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. Was how do you feel about
jumping the gun?
But I mean, then that's it. You think adding another piece is probably the way to go about it?
Oh, I think we have to.
Okay.
I think we're sort of the juxtaposition to a lot of teams right now in that our team is very old. We have a lot of teams in the NBA right now that are very young, that are kind of in a rebuilding situation.
Yeah.
And we're very old. Like, most of our team is aging out right now.
Yeah, a lot of... Let's see. I have this pulled up somewhere that your top... That 80... something. I think it was like 78% of your scoring came from players that were 30 plus or 28 plus. An incredibly high number. Basically, what it was every rotation player that wasn't Kawhi Leonard was 28 or older.
Yeah. That's crazy.
And yeah, so I think you're into that where it's starting to age. Do you think adding Chris Paul really puts you into the conversation again?
I don't know. He didn't have a stellar year, did he, with the Clippers?
I mean,
last season.
They got eliminated. I think maybe that's more on the back of Blake's injury than anything else.
Right.
But Chris Paul is a top 5 guard in the league. And I think adding a top 5 guard. But do you think it puts you over the top? Do you think that now that's a competitive roster? Say, all things being equal, you bring back everybody, not bringing in the salary cap situation to this, but say you bring back all your rotation players minus Manu and add Chris Paul. is that a roster you feel is competitive going forward?
Against the Warriors, probably not.
Okay.
The Warriors are pretty unbeatable. I mean, with the addition of Kevin Durant, it was an unbeatable team last year, and
but then they got beaten.
Okay, okay, excuse me, I misspoke. That was a really good team last year. And then the addition of Kevin Durant just put them over the top.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely true. So that'll bring me to my last question this is the penultimate question. What's your finals prediction going ahead?
I'd say probably the Warriors.
In how many games?
I think it'll be a 7-game series.
7-game series. And the Warriors win it on their home floor.
Yeah.
I got to start writing all these predictions down so I can know what everybody has said. Because I know Mate had a prediction, Andrew had a prediction, Justin had a prediction, and now your prediction. I gotta start bringing these out. I'm sticking to my guns. I'm gonna say Warriors in 6.
Okay.
Even though I'm not much of a predictor. So let's get to the last thing that I really want to talk to you about, and I think something that's very near and dear to your heart, particularly when it comes to Spurs fandom. How much does it mean to you that Becky Hammon has played such a large role and is such a trusted assistant under Pop, just as a woman? I mean, I know that's kind of to say, but yeah, I'm just going to ask the question and say, you're a woman, you're a sports fan in a particularly male-dominated profession. How much does it mean to you to have somebody like Becky Hammon in a position, a trusted assistant to probably the best coach in the league?
Well, I mean, it's inspiring, and I know, again, kind of to say, but it is an inspiration. That's sports remain kind of one of the last glass ceilings, I think. It is hard for women to break into it. I mean, you have a lot of really top-notch reporters, journalists. You have Doris Burke,
Jackie McMullen.
Yeah.
Kay Fagan. There's a lot of sports journalists, and then Doris Burke.
But as far as actually working with these teams, you don't see much of that. And the WNBA is not.
It's a very little brother organization. Well, I suppose not to use the patriarchal term. It's the younger sibling, and it sort of is treated that way.
So it's refreshing. It's nice to see Becky Hammon being such an important part of the franchise. And then, it being Greg Popovich, it's not because she's a woman. It's not because he has to be different. I mean, he does have to be different. That is sort of his MO. But, it's based on merit. He's not just going to bring someone on board to show people something, to make a to make a point, That may play a part of it, but that her merit plays a large part in why she got brought on.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that that's true. I definitely think that her addition to the team was purely on merit, but then now that she's a part of it, Pop gets to also sort of flaunt that around, because he is so against convention in a lot of senses. I mean, he was against basketball convention for a long time, and to have a woman on his staff in a largely male-dominated sport, I think, is something that he takes a lot of pride in.
Well, of course. He has to be a little bit different, always.
Do you think that there's a real chance for a female head coach in the NBA, or do you think that that's probably still a good ways off?
I could see it happening. I really do. There are definitely head coaches that have not necessarily played professional basketball themselves, which I feel kind of maybe used to be sort of a precursor to being a head coach.
Yeah, but then you get Pop being a good example.
Right, exactly. So I think I think definitely there's enough access to. I mean, anybody can watch footage now. Anybody can educate themselves on the sport. It's out there. You have access to it. You have exposure. So I think anybody could be. I think it's anybody's game, honestly.
And you have a lot of high-level women. I mean, UConn's women's program puts out a ton of high-level prospects, and probably some of them are, high IQ basketball players. And then you start to think like, well, they won 3 national titles, and Becky Hammon played in the WNBA, and you got all these people that have played.
Maybe know a thing or two about basketball.
Exactly, that maybe they haven't played at the NBA level, but they have played at a high level and they understand the inner workings of the game. There was also the coach of one of the summer league the combine 5-on-5 teams was a woman, and so there's a little bit of ground being broken there.
Yeah, I think in the foreseeable future, I think we'll see a female head coach.
What do you mean when you say the foreseeable future?
I mean, maybe the next couple of years.
Like 5 seasons?
Maybe.
Give me some odds on that. 50-50?
I'm not a gambling woman.
No, you're not an odds maker. Well, do you have any closing thoughts? Anybody you want to yell at on the Spurs, or anybody you want to put on the bus, or do you feel like you've said your piece now?
As long as Zaza knows how I feel about him,
then you're.
I think I've said my piece.
Okay, all right. Well, that is all for Emily. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for
having me, Alex.
Yeah, not a problem. So that's all for the podcast for this evening. Special thanks to Emily Tellman for being our guest here this evening, and special thanks to all of you for listening. I always appreciate feedback. I'm getting a lot of quality feedback from people on some of our previous episodes, so stay in contact with me. Email me. My email is and1analyticsblog@gmail.com. The Twitter handle is and1analytics. You can listen to us on SoundCloud. You can listen to us on YouTube. And today I posted a special playoff awards show where I hand out a couple of awards to some players who did exceptionally well in the Eastern Conference Finals. So that is and1blogspot.com or and1analytics.blogspot.com. So make sure you're checking that out. And until next time, I'm your host, Alex West, and have a good night.